I can't hear the thunder, but I can feel it in my chest. That is what Ellie Mercer used to tell herself on nights like this. Nights when the sky split open and the rain came down so hard it turned the world into a gray wall of water. She could not hear the storm, but she could feel every single thing about it. The vibration of the thunder rolling through the floorboards of her car, the way the steering wheel buzzed under her fingers when lightning struck close, the pressure change in her ears that told her the worst of it was still coming. She was 18 years old, 5'4", 112 pounds soaking wet, which was exactly what she was right now. Soaking wet. Her car, a 2001 Honda Civic with 214,000 miles on it, and a passenger door that only opened from the outside, had died 6 minutes ago. The dashboard had lit up like a Christmas tree, every warning light firing at once, and then the engine simply quit, like it had been thinking about giving up for a long time and finally found the courage. She coasted to the shoulder of a county road somewhere between Eau Claire and nowhere. The kind of road where you could drive 20 minutes without seeing another car. The kind of road where the trees pressed in close on both sides like they were trying to take it back. November in Wisconsin. 9:30 at night. And the rain was not the soft kind. It was the kind that hit the windshield so hard she could feel the impact through the glass. Ellie had been deaf since the day she was born. Congenital sensor and neural hearing loss, the doctors called it. Total, bilateral, permanent. 3 words that meant the world would never sound like anything to her. She had never heard her mother's voice. She had never heard music or bird song or the particular way rain sounds when it hits a car roof at night. But she had never missed those things either, because you cannot miss what you have never known. What she knew instead was vibration and movement, and the language of faces and hands. She had learned to read lips before she learned to read books. She had learned American Sign Language from her grandmother before she learned to write her own name. Her grandmother, Ruth Mercer, had raised her. Ellie's mother died when Ellie was 6. Ovarian cancer that was caught too late because Ellie's mother had no insurance and no money, and by the time a free clinic found it, the cancer had already decided it was staying. Ellie's father had left before Ellie could form memories of him. Just walked out one morning when she was 2 years old and never came back. No letter, no phone call, no forwarding address. Ruth used to say he could not handle having a deaf daughter and a sick wife and no money all at the same time. Ruth said it without bitterness. She said it the way you say the weather is cold. As a fact. As something that happened and could not be changed and was not worth the energy of being angry about. Ruth raised Ellie in a small house in Ridgewater, Wisconsin, a town so small it did not have a stoplight. Just a blinking yellow caution sign on the main road that worked about half the time. Ruth worked at the local feed store until her knees gave out. Then she took in sewing and alterations from a card table in the living room. She taught Ellie to be practical. She taught Ellie to be tough. She taught Ellie that being deaf was not a limitation. It was a different way of moving through the world, and any world worth living in had room for different. Ruth died the summer before Ellie started college. Heart attack at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in July. Ellie found her when she came downstairs for breakfast. Ruth was sitting in her chair with her sewing glasses still on and her hands folded in her lap like she had simply decided to stop. Ellie sat next to her for a long time before she called anyone. She held Ruth's hand and she felt the stillness of it, and she understood that the last person on earth who loved her without conditions was gone. After Ruth died, Ellie sold the house to pay for the funeral and the debts Ruth had hidden from her. There was enough left over for a security deposit on a studio apartment above the hardware store in Ridgewater. $400 a month. A radiator that worked when it felt like it. A window that looked out on the alley behind the barber shop. Ellie got a job at Mabel's Diner on Main Street. Mabel Boone was 70 years old, hands like leather from decades of washing dishes and kneading bread. She had a face that looked like it had been carved from the same oak as the diner's counter, and a voice that Ellie had been told could carry from the kitchen to the parking lot without effort. Mabel hired Ellie when no one else would, not out of charity. Mabel did not believe in charity, she believed in work. And the first time she watched Ellie navigate a packed Friday night dinner rush, reading orders from lips across a noisy room, remembering every table, never writing anything down because her hands were too busy carrying plates, Mabel understood that this girl did not need pity. She needed opportunity. Mabel became the closest thing to family Ellie had left. It was Mabel who drove Ellie to her college orientation because Ellie's car was in the shop, and the bus did not run on weekends. It was Mabel who proofread Ellie's scholarship essays at the diner counter, at midnight, squinting through reading glasses held together with electrical tape. It was Mabel who told Ellie on the day Ruth died that grief is not something you get over. It is something you get strong enough to carry. And it was Mabel who would see the leather jacket in Ellie's car the morning after everything changed and ask one question and receive an honest answer and never speak of it again. But that night, the night of the storm, Ellie did not know any of that yet. She only knew that she was sitting in a dead car on a dark road with no phone signal and a denim jacket that was about as useful against Wisconsin November as a paper towel against a fire hose. She had driven to Eau Claire that morning for a meeting with her academic advisor at the university. First semester, freshman year, undergraduate. She was studying criminal justice because she wanted to be a lawyer. She did not yet know how long that road would be. She did not yet know about the 3 years of undergraduate work still ahead, then the LSAT, then 3 years of law school, then the bar exam. She only knew that she wanted to stand in a courtroom and speak for people who could not speak for themselves. The irony of a deaf woman wanting to speak for others was not lost on her. She carried it like a small stone in her pocket. A reminder that the things people think you cannot do are sometimes the things you were born to do. The advisor had told her she was doing fine, just fine. The word delivered with a smile that said, I am being encouraging because that is my job. Ellie read lips better than most deaf people her age, and she could tell the difference between someone who meant what they said and someone who was performing kindness like a part in a play. The advisor was performing. Now she sat in her dead car and watched the windows fog up. Her hands were going numb. She could feel the cold creeping up from the floor through her sneakers, through her socks, into her bones. She was wearing the denim jacket over her diner uniform, black pants, white shirt, an apron she had forgotten to take off after the closing shift. She tried her phone again. No signal. She held it toward the ceiling, toward the window, toward every angle she could think of. Nothing. The screen just stared back at her with that little symbol that meant you are completely alone and nobody is coming. 15 minutes passed. She could see her breath. Her fingers were starting to ache. And that is when she noticed it. A light, maybe a quarter mile up the road, set back from the pavement behind a stand of pine trees. Just a faint, yellow glow, barely visible through the curtain of rain. It could be a farmhouse. It could be a gas station. It could be anything. Ellie made the decision that would change her life. She opened the driver's side door and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her like a physical force. The cold was immediate and total. It went through her jacket, through her shirt, through her skin, and settled somewhere deep in her chest. She started walking. Her sneakers were soaked through in the first 30 seconds. The rain ran down the back of her neck and collected in the hollow of her collarbone. She could not hear a single thing. Not the rain, not the wind, not the occasional car that might or might not be coming up behind her. She was walking in one kind of silence through another kind of silence, and the only thing guiding her was that faint yellow light ahead. The quarter mile took 10 minutes. By the time she reached the building, she was shaking so hard she could barely control her legs. Her teeth were clicking together in a rhythm she could feel in her jaw. Her fingers had gone from numb to painful. That deep bone ache that comes right before your hands stop working entirely. The building was low and flat. Cinder block walls, a metal roof, a couple of pickup trucks parked out front, and motorcycles. A lot of motorcycles. Lined up under a metal overhang like soldiers standing at attention. Even in the dark, even half frozen, even through rain so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead. Ellie knew what that meant. She had grown up in small town Wisconsin. She knew what a row of motorcycles outside a cinder block building on a county road meant. She almost turned around. She stood there in the rain, staring at those motorcycles, and every story she had ever heard about motorcycle clubs ran through her head. Dangerous. Violent. Stay away. The words her grandmother had used, the words the newspapers used, the words everyone in every small town used when they talked about men in leather vests with patches on their backs. But her body made the decision her mind could not. She was too cold, too wet, too far from anything else. Her fingers were not working right anymore. Her legs were starting to feel heavy in a way that scared her. She walked up to the door and knocked. The door opened fast, like someone had been standing right behind it. And there they were. 8 of them, sitting around a room that looked like a living room and a garage had been pushed together. Pool table in the center, couch against the wall, television playing something she could not hear, cigarette smoke hanging in the air, and on the back wall a banner, the Death Head logo, Hell's Angels. 8 men stared at her. She stared back. She could not hear if they were speaking. She could see their mouths. Some were open, some were not. She could see their eyes. Some were hard, some were curious. One pair of eyes belonging to a man near the door, who was built like a refrigerator with arms, looked at her with something that might have been concern. Ellie reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a receipt from a used bookstore she had visited that morning. She turned it over to the blank side. Her hands were shaking so badly the pen kept slipping, but she wrote 5 lines in handwriting that trembled across the paper like a seismograph. My car broke down. I am deaf. I cannot call anyone. She held it up. The rain was still hitting her back. She stood in the doorway of a Hells Angels clubhouse at 9:30 at night, 18 years old, soaking wet, holding up a piece of paper like a small white flag. 3 seconds passed. She counted them in her heartbeat. 3 seconds where she was certain she had made the worst decision of her life. Then the big man near the door stepped to the side. She watched his lips move. 5 words she read perfectly. Get in here before you die. Ellie stepped inside. The warmth hit her like a wave. Her muscles unlocked. Her lungs expanded. And the shaking got worse before it got better, because that is what happens when a cold body meets warmth. The body has to recalibrate. She stood there dripping on the concrete floor. Her eyes adjusted to the light, and then a man at the far end of the room stood up. He was older than the others, maybe mid-50s, gray beard trimmed close to his jaw, eyes that had seen enough that very little surprised them. He wore a leather vest with more patches than anyone else in the room. The president. She would learn his name later. Birch Dalton. Birch looked at the note in her hand, then he looked at her face. Then he did something that stopped Ellie's heart. He raised his right hand, and he signed. Not fluent, not fast, but clear. Two signs in American Sign Language. Come in. Safe. Ellie stared at his hand, then at his face. Something moved behind his eyes, something deep and private and old. She did not understand it then. She would not understand it for 7 years, but she felt it. The way she felt everything important. Not through sound, through vibration, through the chest. She walked forward. Birch pointed to a chair near a space heater. She sat down. The warmth hit her left side, and she almost cried from pure physical relief. Then things happened quickly. A man at the pool table, lean 40s with grease embedded in the lines of his knuckles, stood up. He and a younger man, stocky and quiet, grabbed jackets and went out a side door into the rain. She watched them go without knowing where they were headed. Birch sat across from her. He pulled a notebook from his vest and wrote. "What happened to your car?" She wrote back. "Alternator, dead battery, no signal." He read it and nodded. Then he wrote, "Dale and Ratchet went to get it. They will fix it." She started to write that she could just call a tow truck if someone had a phone. But Birch was already looking at her with an expression she recognized. The look that says, "Stop trying to solve this yourself and let people help you." Then someone set a bowl of chili in front of her, steam rising in a slow curl. A spoon and a paper napkin beside it. No ceremony, just food placed in front of a stranger who needed it. She ate, slowly at first because her hands were still shaking, then faster because her body remembered it had not eaten since a granola bar at noon. She did not know if it was actually the best chili ever made. But when you are 18 and half frozen and terrified, and a stranger feeds you without asking for anything, everything tastes different. While she ate, someone placed a flannel shirt on the table next to her bowl. Red and black plaid. Dry. Warm. Smelled like laundry detergent and faintly of motor oil. No one gestured. They just set it there and walked away. She put it on over her soaked diner shirt, 3 sizes too big. She rolled the sleeves up and kept eating. Through the window, she saw headlights, a pickup truck pulling into the lot. Behind it, on a tow chain, her Honda Civic. The lean man, Dale, and the stocky one, Ratchet, had found her car and brought it back in the time it took her to finish a bowl of chili. Ratchet went straight to a garage bay attached to the side of the building. He popped the hood and leaned in. She walked to the doorway and watched. He moved with the efficiency of a man who understood machines the way some people understand music. Hands finding tools without looking. Bolts turning with practiced rhythm. He pulled the dead alternator out, walked to a shelf, and came back with a replacement. The right one, just sitting there, like the universe had placed it on that shelf for exactly this moment. 40 minutes. That is how long it took Ratchet to replace the alternator. 40 minutes in a cold garage in the middle of the night for a girl he had never met. She stood in the doorway the entire time, wanting to help, wanting to say something, but every time she shifted forward, Ratchet shook his head slightly. The way a man shakes his head when the best thing you can do is let him work. When it was done, Ratchet started the car. She could not hear the engine, but she could see the dashboard. Clean. Every warning light gone. Dale appeared with a red jerry can and filled the tank. Full. All the way to the top. Ellie walked back inside. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her tips from the closing shift. $43 in small bills and coins. Everything she had. She held it out toward Birch. He did not look at the money. He looked at her. Then he picked up the notebook and wrote something. She read it, and her vision blurred. You knocked on our door. That is the hardest part. Someone appeared beside her, a man she had not spoken to all night. He held out a jacket. Leather. Worn soft from years of use. There was an oil stain on the left sleeve that had become part of the leather itself. She looked at her own denim jacket, still soaked, hanging on the chair like something that had given up. The man placed the leather jacket in her hands. She read his lips. Bring it back whenever. But the way his mouth shaped the word whenever told her everything. It was not a loan. It was a gift. She drove home that night, 2 hours on dark roads with the heater running and a stranger's jacket on the passenger seat. She did not call anyone. She went straight to her studio apartment, hung the jacket in the very back of her closet, and stood there, in the quiet that was always quiet for her, trying to make sense of what had happened. The next morning, Mabel saw the jacket in Ellie's car when Ellie pulled into the diner parking lot for the opening shift. Mabel looked at the jacket, looked at Ellie, asked one question. Where did you get that? Ellie told her the whole story. The dead car, the rain, the walk, the door, the chili, the alternator, the $43 pushed back across the table. Mabel listened without interrupting. When Ellie finished, Mabel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something, and Ellie read her lips. Some doors you are not supposed to walk through. But some doors, Ellie, some doors are the only ones that matter. Mabel never mentioned it again. Not once in 7 years. She kept Ellie's secret the way good people keep secrets. Not as a burden. As a trust. Ellie told no one else. Because who would believe her? A deaf college freshman in a diner uniform knocks on a Hells Angels clubhouse door, and they fix her car and feed her and fill her tank and give her a jacket, and one of them signs to her in ASL. That is not a story. That is a fairy tale. And Ellie knew that the moment she tried to tell it, that is exactly what it would sound like. So she carried it alone. For 7 years. Those 7 years were not kind to Ellie Mercer. She finished her undergraduate degree in 4 years. Criminal justice major, political science minor. She worked the entire time. Diner shifts, gas station shifts. Tutoring at the university's Disability Services Center, where she taught basic ASL to students who wanted to learn. She slept 5 hours a night on a good night. 4 on a bad one. Her grades were good enough. Good enough was a phrase Ellie learned to live inside. Not because she lacked ability, because the world made everything more expensive when you could not hear. Every lecture required a sign language interpreter. Every study group required someone willing to slow down and face her so she could read their lips. Every phone call required a relay service that added 30 minutes to a 5-minute conversation. She applied to law school after graduation. 7 schools. 3 rejected her, 2 waitlisted her. 1 accepted her with a partial scholarship. The last one accepted her with no aid at all. She chose the partial scholarship. She would still need loans, a lot of them, but she would be in law school. 3 years of reading cases until her eyes burned. 3 years of memorizing statutes and precedents. 3 years of raising her hand in class and watching the professor look briefly confused before remembering the interpreter in the corner was there for her. 3 years of study groups where people talked too fast and turned their faces away and mumbled into their laptops until the words became impossible to read. She sat in the front row of every class. She recorded lectures on video so she could read lips at half speed later. She developed a system of watching the interpreter and the professor simultaneously catching what one missed from the other. She passed the bar exam on her first try. She did not celebrate. She went back to her apartment and sat on the floor and cried. Not from happiness, from exhaustion that had settled past her muscles and bones into the part of her that had been holding everything together for so long, it had forgotten what it felt like to let go. She took a job as a public defender in Milwaukee. Not because it was the best offer, it was the only offer. Private firms were not interested in a deaf attorney. They said it politely. Not the right fit. Communication challenges. Our clients expect. We are concerned about. All of which meant the same thing. We do not believe you can do this. The public defender's office said yes, not enthusiastically. They needed bodies. The caseload was inhuman. 45 active cases, sometimes 50. The pay was less than a first-year teacher. Her office was a cubicle with a wobbling desk and a chair that leaned to the left, no matter how many times she adjusted it. But Ellie had something nobody in that office had. She could read people, not in the vague way people mean when they say, good judge of character. She could literally read them. Their lips, their facial muscles, the micro expressions that flash across a face in a quarter of a second, the way a jaw tightens before a lie, the way nostrils flare when someone holds back anger, the way eyes move depending on whether the brain is remembering or inventing. She had been reading these signals her entire life. When you cannot hear a tone of voice, you learn to see it. When you cannot hear the words, between the words, you learn to watch the face behind the face. Every human being has 2 conversations at the same time. The one they are saying and the one their body is telling. Most people only hear the first. Ellie saw both. Her first case in court was a shoplifting charge. Simple. The client was guilty and knew it and wanted a plea deal. Ellie stood beside her at the defense table and read the judge's lips, and everything went fine until the judge asked Ellie a procedural question, and Ellie did not catch it because the judge had turned his head to look at the clerk while he spoke. Ellie asked him to repeat the question. The judge repeated it with visible impatience, the kind of impatience that comes from a person who is not used to being asked to slow down. She caught it the second time and answered, but she could see the impatience settle into the judge's face like a stain. And she knew it would be there every time she appeared in his courtroom. 3 weeks later, a different judge asked Ellie during a hearing why she did not have a cochlear implant. The question was not relevant to anything. It was curiosity dressed up as concern. Ellie typed her response on her phone and showed it to the judge because she did not trust her voice in that moment. She wrote that implants do not work for everyone, that her type of hearing loss was not a candidate for the procedure, and that her ability to practice law was not dependent on her ability to hear. The judge read the screen and said nothing. But Ellie watched his face and saw something she recognized: the subtle rearrangement of features that happens when a person decides you are less than what they expected. She had been seeing that face her entire life. She was used to it. But being used to it and being unbothered by it were two very different things. She kept working. She kept adapting. She learned which judges spoke clearly and which mumbled. She learned which prosecutors faced her when they spoke and which turned away. She learned to position herself in the courtroom so that she could see the witness stand and the judge in the jury box simultaneously. She developed her system of marginal symbols: a circle for truth, a triangle for uncertainty, a square for lie. Her cross examinations became surgical. She asked questions and watched faces and followed the trails that only she could see. 11 months into the job, a Tuesday morning in March, her supervisor walked into her cubicle and set a manila folder on her desk. She felt the vibration of it landing through the desk surface. New case, assault charge, straightforward. His lips formed the word straightforward the way people say it when they mean not worth your time. Ellie opened the folder. A bar fight in Waukesha County. Her client had been at a roadside bar when an altercation broke out. The arresting officer said the client threw a punch that broke another man's nose. Two witnesses contradicted the officer. One said the client never threw a punch. The other said the client was trying to break up the fight, not start it. She read the client's name, Dale Donovan. Meant nothing to her. She read further. Personal effects inventory from the booking, wallet, keys, cell phone, one leather vest with patches, known associate of a motorcycle club. Something stirred in the back of her mind. A distant vibration she could not yet place. She looked at the patch description, read it twice, then closed the folder and moved to her next case. 3 days later, she drove to the county jail. Through security, down the hallway with the fluorescent lights and the smell of floor cleaner, into the visitation room. She sat down, opened her notepad, waited. The door opened and a man walked in. 50s, lean build, weathered face, hands that had spent decades working on something mechanical, every scar and callus a story. He sat down across from her and looked at her face, and something passed across his features. Not recognition. More like a question forming that had not found its words yet. She watched his lips. "You look familiar, kid." Her stomach dropped. She did not know why. The connection had not arrived yet. But her body knew. Her hands went cold. Her heartbeat picked up. She felt it in her chest. She ignored it. She opened her notepad and wrote her standard questions and turned the pad toward him. But Dale did not write back. He spoke, directly to her face, every word fully formed. The way people speak when they understand without being told that the person across from them needs to see every syllable. He gave his account. He was at the bar with two friends. A man at the next table got loud, started pushing one of Dale's friends. Dale stood up and stepped between them. The loud man threw a punch that caught Dale on the shoulder. Dale grabbed the man's wrist and held it. That was all. He held the man's wrist until the bartender called the police. When the officers arrived, they arrested Dale, not the other man. Ellie took notes. Her handwriting was unsteady. Something underneath the facts was pulling at her. As the guard came to take Dale back, he turned to face her one last time. He raised his right hand, and he signed 2 words in ASL. I know you. Ellie's pen stopped. She stared at his hand, then at his face. And the 7-year-old memory she had locked in the back of her mind in the same closet where the leather jacket hung came rushing forward. Dale, the lean man with grease in his knuckles, the man who had towed her car through a freezing rainstorm, the man who had filled her gas tank to the top, one of the 8 men who had looked at a soaking wet deaf teenager and seen a person instead of a problem. He had recognized her before she recognized him. He had answered her questions and cooperated fully and waited until the very last moment to show her. I know you. She drove home that night, no radio, because there was never radio. But this drive felt different. The silence had weight. She went straight to her bedroom closet and reached past winter coats and old suits into the very back. The jacket was there, on a wire hanger that had bent under its weight over 7 years. Faded leather. The oil stain on the left sleeve darkened with age. She pulled it out and held it up. It still carried the smell of engine oil and something else she could never identify. Maybe the clubhouse, maybe the rain, maybe just the smell of a kindness that was never meant to be repaid. She carried it to the kitchen table and sat across from it, and the apartment was still, and the refrigerator hummed through the floor, and outside a car passed, and she felt its vibration fade, and she sat there for a long time looking at that jacket. The next morning, she walked into the office planning to handle Dale's case efficiently. Clean plea deal? Probation? Simple. She did not even get to her desk. Her supervisor caught her in the hallway. She read his lips, and what they said turned the ground to sand. Donovan case. DA added charges overnight. The arresting officer filed a supplemental statement. Says your client pulled a knife. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Ellie stood in the hallway while people moved around her. She had read the arrest report 3 times. She had read the witness statements. She had reviewed the booking inventory. There was no knife recovered, no knife mentioned by either witness. The only person claiming there was a knife was the officer who filed a new statement 12 hours after the arrest. 12 hours. That is not memory. That is construction. She went straight to her desk and pulled the body cam footage. Every officer in Waukesha County wore a body camera. The footage was supposed to be available within 24 hours. It had taken 5 days. She watched it on her laptop without headphones because she did not need sound. She watched it the way she watched everything, with eyes that had spent 25 years learning to see what others only heard. Dale was seated when the officers entered, both hands flat on the table. When officers approached, Dale stood slowly, hands visible, palms open, fingers spread. The man whose nose was allegedly broken was already bleeding when the camera entered the room. Whatever happened to his face happened before Dale was near him. No knife appeared in any frame, no sudden movement, no reaching for a belt. A man standing calmly with his hands up while officers moved toward him with their hands already on their belts. She pulled the arresting officer's service record. Officer Brant Hollis. And the picture got clearer. And worse. Hollis had arrested members of Dale's motorcycle club 4 times in 3 years. Every case dropped or dismissed. The evidence was never there. But the arrests kept coming, every 8 or 9 months. A new charge, a new booking, a new few nights in lockup before the whole thing collapsed. This was not justice. This was harassment wearing a badge. Ellie closed her laptop. She thought about Dale in that jail cell. She thought about his hand signing, "I know you." She thought about a night 7 years ago when she was 18 and freezing and had nowhere else to go, and a room full of men in leather vests had saved her. And now the system she had spent 7 years fighting to join was being used as a weapon against the man who had helped save her. She opened her notepad, wrote 2 words, circled them, "Not guilty." She texted her supervisor, "I am taking this to trial." The response came in 30 seconds. "You sure about that a biker case in this county in an election year?" She typed 1 word. "Yes." The reply came, "Nobody's going to thank you for this. It is going to cost you." She typed back, "I know." Her phone buzzed one more time. "It is your funeral." She set the phone face down and sat there in the fluorescent hum of the office, 25 years old, 11 months into a career nobody thought she could have, carrying 45 cases and a leather jacket and a debt she had never been asked to repay. She was going to fight. Because 7 years ago, she knocked on a door and someone opened it. Now, it was her turn. Ellie started building the defense that night at her kitchen table. She moved the jacket to the back of a chair and spread case files across the surface. She pulled every document she could find, every prior arrest involving Dale's club, every dismissed charge, every booking record. She built a timeline on a yellow legal pad, drawing lines between dates, circling names, connecting dots. Nobody had bothered to connect because nobody had bothered to look. The pattern was surgical in its regularity. Every 8 to 9 months, Officer Hollis arrested a member of the club. The charges varied: disorderly conduct, public intoxication, simple assault. But the structure was identical. An incident at a bar or a gas station, Hollis arriving on scene, Hollis making the arrest. Then, weeks later, the charges dissolving because the evidence could not support them. 4 times in 3 years. And now a fifth, but this time not disorderly conduct. This time, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. This time, someone wanted Dale Donovan in prison. 3 days later, she drove to the county jail for her second meeting with Dale. She slid the printed timeline across the table. Dale looked at it for a long time. His eyes moved from date to date. Then he looked up. She had her notepad ready. "Tell me about the officer." Dale was quiet. The kind of quiet that means someone is deciding whether to trust you. Then he spoke directly to her face. "They have been leaning on us for years." The whole chapter. Pulling guys over for nothing, running plates at rallies, showing up at the clubhouse with warrants that do not hold up. Nobody cares because of the patches. You see the vest, and you have already made up your mind. That last sentence landed somewhere deep, because she remembered standing on that dark road at 18, staring at motorcycles under an overhang. She remembered almost turning around, almost letting the patches decide for her. She wrote on her notepad, "Why did you not tell me this before?" Dale shrugged. One shoulder. "Would it have mattered? You would have seen the vest and made up your mind." She held his gaze. Then she wrote 2 words and underlined them. "Not guilty." Dale searched her face for a long moment, testing whether she meant it. Then he nodded. One small nod that meant more than any contract. Back at the office, she told her supervisor. He gave her the look that said, "You're about to make your life harder, and nobody will help." She read his lips. "You want to fight the DA on a biker case. You have been here less than a year. Half the judges in this building still do not know how to handle a deaf attorney in their courtroom. You want to add this on top of that?" She turned her phone screen toward him. "The charges are fabricated. The body cam proves it. The officer has a documented pattern. I have the evidence. I have..." His lips moved. "Nobody is going to thank you. If you lose, and you probably will, because juries here do not like bikers, it will follow you. Every case after this will be harder. Every judge will remember you as the attorney who went to war over a biker." "Good," she typed. He stared at her, then shook his head and muttered something to the window. She caught 3 words. "It is your funeral." She went home that night surrounded by files. The jacket hung on the kitchen chair. She thought about the man who gave it to her in the way his lips shaped the word "whenever." She thought about Birch signing safe. She thought about 8 men who saw a person instead of a problem. And she thought about the system she had spent 7 years fighting to join. The system being weaponized against the people who had saved her. She felt the weight of that contradiction like a stone on her sternum. She needed witnesses. 2 men had been with Dale that night. One was Ratchet, the man who had replaced her alternator 7 years ago. The stocky, quiet one, whose hands understood machines the way poets understand language. Ratchet was the key witness. He had been at the bar. His statement contradicted Hollis completely. Dale never threw a punch. Dale stepped between 2 men to stop a fight. The man with the broken nose was hit by someone else, someone who left before police arrived. But Ratchet was on parole. When Ellie called through the relay service, the operator typed his words on her screen. The words were typed with fear. "I cannot do it. My parole officer called yesterday. Said if I get involved, they will file a violation. I have 14 months left. If they file, I go back inside. I cannot risk it." She typed back, "Ratchet, they are saying Dale pulled a knife. You were there. You know that did not happen." A long pause. Then the operator typed his response. "I know it did not happen. You know it did not happen. But I have 14 months and a life I am trying to hold together, and I am sorry. I am truly sorry." The connection ended. Ellie sat in her dark office long after the cleaning crew had gone, only her desk lamp on casting a small circle of light that made everything else enormous. She had a fabricated charge, a silenced witness, a DA who wanted a conviction, a client the jury would judge on sight, and she was a deaf attorney less than a year into her career going against the sheriff's department. But she knew what those patches meant. Not what the world said. What they actually meant. The second witness, Tucker Briggs, agreed to testify. He was not a club member. A friend of Dale's from a construction job years back. No criminal record. No club affiliation. His statement was clean and matched Dale's account in every detail. But one witness against a police officer was a coin flip. She needed more. She drove to the bar on a Saturday afternoon, stood in the parking lot studying the building. Low wooden structure on a county road, beer signs in the windows, gravel lot. She walked around slowly. looking at everything the way a deaf woman looks at a space she needs to understand, not listening for clues, seeing them. And that is when she noticed it across the road, about 60 yards away, a small liquor store. One of those houses turned into a shop. Beer and wine and cigarettes and lottery tickets. And on the front corner, mounted under the eave, pointed directly at the road and the bar's parking lot, a security camera. She felt the vibration in her chest. The one that meant something important was close. She walked across the road. Behind the counter was a woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. The woman spoke while looking down at a newspaper. Ellie could not read her lips. She took out her notepad and wrote, "I am a public defender working on a case involving an incident at the bar across the road. I noticed your security camera. Do you still have footage from that night?" The woman read the note, then looked at Ellie and spoke clearly. "Machine keeps 30 days. After that, it records over." "When was it?" Ellie wrote the date. The woman counted on her fingers, frowned, then held up 2 fingers. 2 days. They had 2 days before the footage was gone forever. Ellie called her supervisor through the relay. She requested an immediate subpoena. He pushed back. Long shot. Camera probably caught nothing. She typed 3 words. "Please. Trust me." The subpoena was filed that afternoon. The footage was preserved the following morning with less than 24 hours before the recording cycle would have erased it. She watched the footage alone on her apartment floor. Laptop balanced on law books. The quality was poor. Grainy. A $40 camera installed by someone who watched a tutorial. But it was pointed at exactly the right angle. The bar's parking lot, and through the front window, a partial view of the interior. She watched the timestamp scroll. Patrons entering and leaving, the lot filling up, and then the incident. She saw Dale seated, the man at the next table standing aggressively, pushing. Dale standing and stepping between them. And then she saw something that changed everything. The punch, the one that broke the other man's nose, thrown not by Dale, but by a younger man. Stocky build, short hair, he came from the left side of the frame through a single hard right hand and immediately moved toward the back of the bar. By the time police lights appeared in the parking lot, this man was gone. Out the back door. Into the night, Ellie paused the footage, rewound, watched again, then zoomed in on the man. The image was grainy but enough. Height, build, hair. She pulled up Officer Hollis's social media. It took less than 5 minutes. A Thanksgiving family photograph. Hollis, his wife, his children, and standing next to him with an arm around his shoulder, a younger man, stocky build. Short hair. The caption read, "Thankful for family. Love you, little brother." The man who threw the punch was Brant Hollis's brother. The entire arrest, the fabricated knife charge, the supplemental statement filed 12 hours late. All of it was not about targeting the club. It was about protecting family. Hollis arrested Dale to cover for his own brother. Ellie sat on her floor and felt the room tilt. This was not an officer with a grudge. This was an officer committing crimes to hide another crime, fabricating evidence, filing false reports, obstructing justice, all to keep his brother out of handcuffs. She saved the footage to 3 separate drives, printed screenshots, documented the chain of custody with precision because what she had was a bomb, and bombs destroy the person holding them if handled carelessly. Then the bomb nearly destroyed her. 4 days before trial. A formal motion from the DA's office. Conflict of interest challenge. Officer Hollis had filed to have Ellie removed from the case. Grounds prior personal relationship with the defendant's motorcycle club. The motion cited a specific incident, 7 years prior. A young woman matching Ellie's description seen at the Hells Angels clubhouse in rural Wisconsin. A nearby resident had mentioned it to Hollis. The woman arrived during a rainstorm and left hours later in a car apparently repaired by club members. Ellie read the motion in her supervisor's office. He stood by the window with his arms crossed. Is it true? Were you at that clubhouse? She nodded once. Why? She typed on her phone. My car broke down. I was 18. November. Freezing. They helped me, fixed my car, and I left. That is the entire story. Her supervisor rubbed his face. If the judge grants this, you are off the case. And it will not stop there. The Bar Association will investigate your law school applications, your bar exam. Every case you have handled, if they find you failed to disclose a conflict, you could lose your license. Each word landed in her chest. License. Bar Association. Investigate. 7 years of building a career nobody believed she could have. 7 years of reading lips and adapting and fighting for every inch. All of it could vanish because she once knocked on a door. She went home and sat at the kitchen table with the jacket and the motion side by side. One represented the best thing strangers had ever done for her. The other represented the worst thing the system could do to her for being grateful. She sat through the night watching the light shift from lamp yellow to the pale gray of dawn. She was not going to withdraw. If the system wanted her license for defending a man who saved her life, the system would have to look her in the eye while it took it. She filed her response the next morning. 3 pages, one argument in 12 different ways. A chance encounter 7 years ago in which the defendant's associates provided emergency roadside assistance does not constitute a personal relationship that compromises legal representation. Helping a stranger in distress is not evidence of bias. It is evidence of character, and character is precisely what this case is about. The hearing was in chambers. Ellie on one side, the DA on the other. Judge Clara Kessler, early 60s, silver hair, read both motions, then looked at Ellie. Ms. Mercer, do you believe your prior contact with the motorcycle club affects your ability to represent Mr. Donovan impartially? Ellie had practiced this response in front of her bathroom mirror, watching her own lips. She spoke aloud. The voice she could not hear. The voice she had been told sounded flat. The voice she hated. It filled the small room. Your Honor, 7 years ago, I was an 18-year-old girl whose car broke down on a freezing night. I knocked on a door because I had no other choice. The people inside helped me. They did not ask my name. They did not ask for payment. They fixed my car and sent me home. That experience taught me something I carry into every courtroom. People deserve to be judged by what they do, not by what they wear. That is not a conflict of interest. That is the foundation of the law itself. Judge Kessler looked at her for a long moment, then at the DA, then back at Ellie. Motion denied. Ms. Mercer will continue as counsel. But, counselor, if at any point I believe your personal history is influencing your judgment, I will revisit this. Understood. Understood. She walked out of chambers and made it to her car before her legs gave way. She sat behind the wheel and pressed her forehead against it and breathed. She had won the first battle. The war was 3 days away. That night, working late in the empty office, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She read the text. Drop the case or we drop you. 6 words glowing on a screen in a dark room. She stared at them. She thought about calling the police. She thought about the fact that whoever sent this knew her number and probably knew where she lived and what time she left the office. She was 25 and alone, and someone had threatened her, and she could not even hear if someone was walking up behind her. She deleted the message, not because she was unafraid, because she had been afraid before. She had been afraid on a dark road at 18 with a dead car and nowhere to go, and she had walked toward the light and knocked anyway. She closed her laptop, walked to the coat rack where the leather jacket hung. She had started bringing it to the office, not to wear, to have it close. She folded it carefully and placed it in her briefcase. She turned off the lamp, walked down the dark hallway toward the red glow of the exit sign. Behind her, the office sat empty. Ahead of her, the courtroom waited. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old wood. Ellie walked through the double doors at 8:45 on a Thursday morning in April. Late spring light cutting through tall windows at a low angle, turning the dust in the air gold. She carried her briefcase in one hand and a leather bag in the other. Dale was at the defense table. White shirt, no vest. Even in civilian clothes, he looked like exactly who he was. A man who had lived a certain life and would not rearrange his face to apologize for it. Hands folded, back straight, eyes steady. She sat beside him, set the leather bag on the table. He glanced at it. She opened her notepad and wrote 2 words. Trust me. He read them, nodded. The gallery was half full. Reporters, courthouse regulars, and in the back row 4 men in leather vests with patches visible. A deliberate choice. She recognized one face from that night 7 years ago, but she did not see Birch. She looked for him twice. The gray beard, the eyes that had once signed safe. He was not there. Something in her chest tightened. The court interpreter took position to Ellie's left. Grace. Fast hands. Clean signs. She delivered words the way a mirror delivers a reflection. The prosecution went first. The arresting officer, Brant Hollis, took the stand. Uniform pressed. Badge polished. He testified with calm precision. He described the altercation, the scene, Dale standing over the injured man, the knife, every sentence rehearsed. Ellie watched from the defense table. Not his words, his face, the muscles around his eyes, the rhythm of his jaw. She watched the way she had spent 25 years watching. When Hollis described the knife, when his lips formed the words, the defendant produced a knife from his belt. Something happened. His left eyelid twitched, a micro contraction most people would never catch. His nostrils flared for a quarter second. His jaw tightened on the word knife. She drew a small square in her legal pad margin. Her symbol for lie, drew it twice, underlined it. The prosecution finished. The judge looked at Ellie. She stood. She approached the witness stand with her notepad. She had written her questions in advance because speaking in court still required deliberate effort. She could not hear if her voice was too loud or too soft, so she read each question carefully, watching Hollis's lips for answers. Grace signed anything Ellie missed. She asked Hollis where Dale was when officers entered the bar. Hollis said standing. Ellie played the body cam footage on the exhibit screen. The jury watched a man seated at a table, both hands visible, palms down. She asked when the knife appeared. Hollis said Dale pulled it from his belt. She let the footage continue. Dale's hands open, fingers spread, no knife, no movement toward any belt. She asked if a knife was recovered. Hollis said no. She asked how a man could threaten someone with a weapon that was never found, never photographed, never logged into evidence. Hollis said the knife was discarded before officers secured the scene. She let that answer sit. She could not hear the silence in the room, but she could see it. The way two jurors glanced at each other, the way a woman in the front row leaned forward half an inch. The physical tells that most attorneys missed because they were listening to words. Ellie never missed them because words had never been available to her. She asked her final question for this witness. Officer, how many times have you arrested members of this motorcycle club in the past 3 years? The prosecution objected. Overruled. Hollis said once, maybe twice. His lips formed the words too carefully. The rhythm of calculation, not memory. Ellie presented the records on the exhibit screen, one at a time. Date, charge, dismissal. Date, charge, dismissal. 4 times. A pattern so regular it could have been drawn with a ruler. Hollis's blink rate increased. His hands moved from armrest to his lap, the signals of a man losing control of his own narrative. She called Tucker Briggs next. He was nervous but clear. Dale did not throw a punch. Dale stepped between 2 men and stopped the fight. The man with the broken nose was hit by someone else entirely, someone who left before police arrived. The prosecution tried to discredit Tucker. Fellow associate, reason to protect a friend. Tucker held steady, told the truth simply, and Ellie watched the jury's faces and saw belief settling in, that softening around the eyes when a person decides something is true. Then Ellie stood and addressed the judge. She requested permission to present additional evidence. A security recording from a business across the road obtained by subpoena. The prosecution objected, had not reviewed it. The judge asked when it was disclosed. Ellie said it was in the defense exhibit list, filed 10 days prior. Whether the prosecution reviewed their own filings was not her responsibility. The judge allowed it. Ellie played the footage. Grainy. Poor quality. But pointed at exactly the right angle. Through the bar's front window, the interior was partially visible. The jury watched a man approach Dale's table, pushing, Dale standing between them, and then a different man from the left side of the frame throwing a single hard punch that connected with the injured man's face. This man immediately moved toward the back and disappeared. Police lights appeared after he was already gone. Ellie paused on the clearest frame of the man who threw the punch. She placed next to it on the screen the Thanksgiving photograph from Hollis's social media. Same build, same height, same hair. The caption visible, thankful for family. Love you, little brother. The room went still. She could see it in the way the prosecutor's pen stopped, in the way Judge Kessler's eyes moved slowly from the screen to the prosecution table, in the way jurors looked at each other with the expression that says, "We have been lied to." The DA requested a recess, denied. Then, Ellie did the last thing. She reached into the leather bag and pulled out a jacket. Old leather. Faded by 7 years. Oil stain on the left sleeve darkened with age, but still there. She held it up for the jury, set it on the defense table beside Dale. She turned to face the jury. She raised her hands, and she began to sign. She had thought about this moment for weeks, whether to speak or sign, whether to perform hearing as she always had in courtrooms, shaping her mouth around words she could not hear, or whether to use her own language. The language she dreamed in, the language her grandmother taught her before she could write her name. She chose her own language, not a strategy, not to win sympathy, because this story deserved to be told in the truest way she knew, and her truest language lived in her hands. Grace stood beside her and spoke aloud as Ellie's hands moved through the air. The courtroom watched a deaf woman tell a story, not with her voice, but with her body. The silence of sign language in a room built for spoken argument. Hands cutting through air in a space designed for voices. 7 years ago, I was 18 years old. My car broke down on a county road in rural Wisconsin in November. Freezing rain. No phone signal. I am deaf. I could not call anyone. I walked a quarter mile in the storm to the only light I could see. I knocked on a door. It opened, and I was standing in front of 8 men in leather vests. Hell's angels. Her hands paused, then moved again. Then I was terrified. Every story I'd ever heard said those men were dangerous. But I was freezing and had nowhere else to go. I held up a note that said I am deaf and my car broke down. And they let me in. They fed me. A man named Ratchet fixed my car in 40 minutes. Another man filled my tank. And a man named Birch, the president of that chapter, looked at me and signed 2 words in my language, the language I was born into. He signed safe. Come in. Safe. She touched the jacket. They gave me this because mine was soaked through. A man handed it to me and said, bring it back whenever. But the way he said it told me it was not alone. I drove home and never told anyone. Because who would believe me? A deaf girl knocks on a Hell's Angels door and they save her. That is not a story the world tells about men in these patches. She looked at Dale. His eyes were wet. His scarred hands gripped together on the table, so tight the knuckles had gone white. She turned back to the jury. Her hands moved with a precision that came from 25 years of living inside this language. That man was one of the men who saved me that night. He towed my car through the rain without asking my name. He never expected thanks. He did it because that is who he is. That is who these people are when nobody is watching and no camera is recording and there is nothing to gain. The man the prosecution wants you to convict of a crime that never happened is a man who stood in a freezing rainstorm to help a deaf stranger and carried that night quietly for 7 years without expecting it to ever matter. She lowered her hands. Grace fell silent. The courtroom was still. 12 jurors looked at the jacket and then at the man beside it, and they did not see a defendant or a biker or patches or a police report. They saw a man who had helped a stranger on the worst night of that stranger's life and never expected to hear about it again. Dale looked at Ellie. His eyes moved from her face to the jacket and back. His jaw tightened. Not anger. The effort of holding something enormous inside a body not built to contain it. If this story reminds you that people are not always what you expect, hit subscribe. That is all I ask. The jury left at 11:20. Ellie sat at the defense table with her hands flat on the wood, the jacket between her and Dale. Neither touched it. The gallery cleared slowly. The club members in the back row stayed. 40 minutes. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes, the same length of time it had taken Ratchet to replace an alternator in a cold garage 7 years earlier. They returned at noon. The four-person stood. Ellie watched his lips. She did not need grace. She did not need an interpreter for 2 words she could read on any face in any language. Not guilty. Every count. Dale stood. His legs were unsteady. He gripped the table edge and then let go. Ellie stood beside him. He turned and took both her hands. Not a handshake. A grip. The kind that carries everything words cannot hold. She read his lips. It was you. The girl on the road. She nodded. It was me. He held on another moment, then let go. Wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looked at the jacket, picked it up, held it, then set it down and pushed it toward her. Keep it. You earned it twice. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon had made its decision. The rain had stopped. Late spring light cutting through clouds at a low angle, turning everything gold. The courthouse steps were wet and reflected the sky like a mirror. Dale walked down and stopped. Because there at the bottom, beside a row of motorcycles, stood Birch Dalton. 7 years had changed him. Heavier frame, a limp that said bad knee or bad hip or both. His beard had gone from gray to white, but his eyes had not changed. They were the first thing she had trusted on the worst night of her life, and they were exactly the same. Ellie walked down the steps and stopped in front of him. For a long time, neither moved. Then Birch raised his right hand and signed one word, safe. The same word. The same hand. The same meaning. 7 years collapsed into a single gesture. And then Birch did something he had never done. He reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out a photograph. Small. Wallet-sized. Creased from years of being carried against a man's chest. He held it out. It was a photograph of a girl. Maybe 16. Dark hair. Bright eyes. A smile that could light up a room or break a heart or both. She was signing in the photograph, her hands frozen in mid-motion. Ellie read the sign even in a still image. I love you. Birch spoke, and Ellie read his lips. My daughter, Eleanor. She was born deaf. She died when she was 19. Car accident on a county road not far from the clubhouse. I learned to sign for her. She taught me most of what I know. He paused, then continued. When you showed up at our door that night soaking wet and holding up that note, I thought I was looking at a ghost. You were the same age she had been, standing on the same kind of road where I lost her. Deaf. Alone. Scared. And, ouch, I saw my girl standing in that doorway. That is why I signed safe. Because that is the last thing I ever signed to my daughter. Every night before she went to sleep, I would sign it, and she would close her eyes. Safe. Something broke open in Ellie's chest. Not pain. Something larger. The understanding that kindness is not random. That it comes from somewhere. From loss. From love. From the kind of scar that never heals, but teaches you how to heal others. She stepped forward and put her arms around Birch Dalton, a 25-year-old deaf public defender embracing a 62-year-old Hells Angels chapter president on the steps of the Milwaukee County Courthouse in late afternoon light. He was stiff for a moment. Then his arms came up and held her, and she felt his chest shaking the way chests shake when a person is crying without making sound. She knew that kind of crying. She had been doing it her entire life. The club members came forward, one by one. Firm handshakes, quiet nods. Respect that did not need to announce itself. Dale stood beside Ellie on the steps. Someone pulled out a phone. A photograph. The two of them side by side. The public defender and the biker. The girl who knocked and the man who opened the door. She held the jacket in her arms. 2 weeks after the trial, Internal Affairs opened an investigation into Officer Brant Hollis. The security footage from the liquor store, combined with Ellie's documentation of the arrest pattern, triggered a review that expanded quickly. 3 other officers were pulled in. Body cam footage from prior arrests was re-examined. Booking records audited. Hollis was suspended without pay. His brother was charged with the assault that started the entire chain. The prior charges against Dale's club members were formally vacated. The county sheriff issued a statement using the words regrettable and committed to transparency, which are the words institutions use when they have been caught, and are navigating the distance between accountability and self-preservation. The threatening text message Ellie had deleted was traced during the Internal Affairs investigation. It had been sent from a prepaid phone purchased at a gas station 14 miles from the Hollis family home. No charges were filed for the threat itself, but Ellie did not need charges. She needed the truth. And the truth had already won. 3 days after the verdict, Ellie found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. No signature. Just 6 words in handwriting she recognized from a garage in November. Handwriting that belonged to a man whose hands spoke more clearly through tools than through words. I am sorry I could not come. Clipped to the papers was a small metal pin in the shape of a wrench. Ratchet's way of saying what his parole would not let him say in a courtroom. Ellie held the pin in her palm for a long time. Then she clipped it to the inside of the leather jacket next to the oil stain where it would stay. She went back to work on Monday. Her cubicle was exactly as she left it. Nothing had moved. But when she sat down and opened the first file on her desk, the crooked chair and the humming lights felt different. They felt like hers, like she had earned the right to sit in them. She pulled 2 new files from the stack. A homeless veteran charged with trespassing for sleeping in a public park. A single mother charged with shoplifting. Formula and diapers. That is what the woman had taken. She took both cases. Not because the clients were innocent. Maybe they were. Maybe they were not. She took them because they deserved someone who would stand next to them and say, "You have to prove it." Someone who understood that the worst moment of your life does not have to define every moment after it. The photograph from the courthouse steps ended up in a frame on her desk. Simple black border. When colleagues asked, she typed on her phone and showed them. Old friend. That was enough. The leather jacket hung on her cubicle coat rack. She never wore it. It just hung there carrying the smell of engine oil and a night that changed everything. Every morning she saw it before the files, before the desk, before the lights. The reminder that the world is not always what it appears. 6 months later, Ellie filed paperwork to open a legal aid clinic in Ridgewater, the small town where she had worked at Mabel's Diner, 30 minutes from the clubhouse where 8 men had saved her. She would keep her Milwaukee position during the week and drive to Ridgewater on weekends to take cases nobody else would. People who could not afford attorneys, people chewed up by a system that was supposed to protect them, people who looked wrong or dressed wrong or lived wrong according to rules that comfortable people make. Mabel Boone offered the back room of the diner for free. It was small. It smelled like coffee and bacon grease. The walls were thin enough to feel the kitchen vibrations through them. It was perfect. Mabel stood in the doorway of the back room the day Ellie set up her desk. She watched Ellie arrange her files, her laptop, her 2 framed photographs. Then Mabel spoke, and Ellie read her lips. Your grandmother would have been proud. Not surprised. Ruth was never surprised by you. But proud. Very proud. Ellie looked at Mabel. Mabel looked back. Then Mabel turned and walked to the kitchen because the lunch rush was starting, and pie crusts do not roll themselves, and Mabel Boone had never in 70 years let sentiment interfere with a schedule. On the desk, Ellie placed 2 frames, the courthouse photograph and a second frame containing the creased wallet-sized photograph of Eleanor Dalton signing I love you. Birch had given it to her the day after the trial. He had shown up at her apartment. Her downstairs neighbor banged on the ceiling hard enough for Ellie to feel the vibration. She went down and found Birch on the sidewalk with the photograph in his hand. She shook her head, signed that she could not take it, that it was his daughter's, that it belonged with him. He spoke, and she read his lips. She would have wanted you to have it. You are doing what she would have done if she had the chance. Ellie took it, held it the way you hold something that belongs to someone else's grief. Then she signed thank you, and he signed back the only word he had ever needed to say to her. Safe. Months passed. The clinic grew slowly. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. Word spread the way it spreads in small towns, not through ads or websites, through conversations at gas stations, in church suppers, and the counter at Mabel's Diner. There is a girl, people said, a deaf girl. She is a lawyer. She does not charge anything. She fights like hell. A farm worker denied wages. An elderly widow fighting eviction. A young man with a disability denied benefits he was entitled to. She fought each case with facts and patience and the ability to see what others could only hear. Late on a Wednesday night, 11 months after the trial, Ellie was working in the back room. The diner had closed hours ago. Mabel had left a pot of coffee on the warmer and a piece of pie on the counter. The room held the kind of stillness Ellie had lived inside her entire life. She was reading a deposition on her laptop when she felt a vibration through the floor. Someone at the front door. She walked through the dark diner. Tables clean, chairs pushed in, the coffee machine cooling with a faint ticking she could feel through her shoes. She reached the front door and opened it. A young woman stood on the sidewalk. Early 20s, thin jacket not nearly warm enough for the night air. Wet hair. Eyes carrying the kind of fear that comes from not knowing where to go next. She was shaking. Not from cold. From something that lives deeper than cold. The young woman spoke. Ellie read her lips. They told me you help people no one else will. I do not have any money. I do not have anywhere to go. But I did not do what they are saying I did. Ellie looked at her. and for a moment she was not in the doorway of Mabel's diner. She was on a dark road in Wisconsin, 18 years old, freezing, staring at a door she was terrified to knock on, deciding whether to trust that whoever was on the other side would be better than the cold. She stepped aside, she pulled out a chair, she pointed to it. The young woman sat down. Ellie walked behind the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of the young woman. Then she sat down across from her. She opened her notepad. She picked up her pen, and the door stayed open.